afternoon and welcome to Flight 93 National Memorial. I am Donna Gibson and I am the president of the Friends of Flight 93 Board of Directors and your moderator for today's program. The Friends are the primary philanthropic partner to the Park Service at this site. We work in partnership with the park, the families of Flight 93, the National Park Foundation to raise funds needed to support programs such as this, building of trails, education for children, school-age children, and other projects identified as necessary to enhance your experience while visiting us. As we pause on this Memorial Day to honor and remember the heroes who died while serving our country, it is also appropriate for us to pause and remember the 40 passenger and crew members of United 93. These 7 crew members and 33 individuals bravely took action and fought to save their plane from being used as a missile to take more lives. Their actions will forever be remembered as a defining moment in history. One of the passengers on United 93 was Lois Snacky II, or as you'll hear him being called, Joey. On September 9th, Joey had celebrated his 42nd birthday. On September 10th, he received a call from his boss letting him know that he had to jump on the next plane to San Francisco to handle a problem for work. Joey could have delegated this task to anyone else, but being the man that he was, he booked a flight out that morning and had a return flight later that evening. I've had the great honor of working alongside today's guest, Kenneth Nacke, younger brother of Joey. Ken has been involved in the leadership of making sure that this memorial came to be as he served on the family board. He speaks regularly about his brother and his personal involvement with this memorial. Patrick White, cousin of Joey, has been a member of both the family of Flight 93 and the Friends of Flight 93. Patrick has also been involved with this site since the very beginning and has served on both boards. Patrick was my mentor as I joined the board and transitioned to the president's role. Pat and Ken, welcome.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you.
Good to be here.
So Ken, why don't you begin and tell us a little bit about yourself and what it was like to grow up with Joey.
We'll just start off with Joey. Joey was the oldest of 4, and we traveled around a lot. We went to like 4 different high schools. My dad was a plant manager for AMP, for those of you who don't remember AMP, and he traveled around. But so we went to 4 different high schools, but we mainly grew up in a small town called Olean, New York, which is right outside of Bradford, Pennsylvania. Give you an idea of where it's at. And Olean had 2 high schools. One was a Catholic high school, one was a public high school. Just to give you an idea how small of a town it was. And like I said, Joey was the oldest of 4, and early on, my parents gave him the job of keeping all 4 of us reined in. And he had to take care of us, make sure we were where we were supposed to be at the time we were supposed to be. So, and I truly had the honor and the pleasure of walking in his footsteps, because I had some of the same teachers that he had, some of the same coaches that he had, all through my life. And even a short time that he worked for AMP, I took the job that he left and got promoted in, and growing up, my dad got me the same job that he had. So I had some of the same bosses that he had. So really, it was kind of an honor and a pleasure to walk in his footsteps. I had a quick little story, and I didn't tell this at the earlier session. I'll tell it at this one. We moved to Philadelphia back in 1976, and I was just going in to be a freshman in high school. And I can't remember what grade Joey was in. But anyways, I'm walking down the hallway, and I can see Joey and 3 of his friends walking towards me. Next thing you know, man, I'm picked up, I'm grabbed. One guy opens the locker, stuffs me in the locker, and closed the door on me. You know what I mean? A couple minutes in there, he lets me out, gives me a big hug, and sends me on my way. So just kind of give you an idea what it's like to have an older brother like that, who had, you know what I mean, on the exterior, he was rough and rugged, but then when he got in close, he'd grab you, put you in a headlock, whisper in your ear, say, hey, I love you and I miss you, and give you a kiss on your cheek and send you on your way. So, like I said, it was truly an honor and pleasure, you know, following in his footsteps. And I can tell you, I'm a police officer. I've been one for 31 years. And actually, at one point in time, Joey lived with us. He took a job down in at the AMP warehouse, and he was the director of warehousing. So he was living with us in our basement. So I'm working the Essex precinct where I first started at, and he goes, I'm going to work with you this day. So I did the form. He's riding with me, and we get a call, a guy with a gun. So I said, listen, I'm supposed to drop you off, put you on the corner before I go to this call. And he goes, you're not doing that. And I says, okay. I said, look, when we get there, I'm going to lock the door. I want you just to lay down and duck and keep you safe. So me and another officer arrive at the call. The next thing you know, you can hear that distinctive sound where a guy racks around into a shotgun. And I said, hey, stay right where you are. I'm closing the door, and I got to move away from there. So we're out of the corner of my eye. In our old cars, we had shotguns above our heads where you could hit a button and pull it out. Never showed him how to do that, but I could see the movement of him yanking on the shotgun of the car because he wants to come out and help me do my job. And I'm thinking to myself, what did I get myself into that day? You know, it's just a role that my parents gave him all through life, that his job and his responsibility was to take care of his siblings. And that's just give you kind of an example real quick, because we only got an hour. So I can sit here and talk all day and tell you all the crazy stories and the mischief that we got into, you know, growing up. But only in New York is probably about the same size as Somerset County as it is here. Same way, you know what I mean? You had snow from November to April, you know, so cold weather, winds. But I tell you what, there was no better place to grow up and get that true family values that you want to have growing up as a child. So just kind of give you a real quick background that he had. And he was a great brother. You know, I'd give my left arm to have him back. But, you know what I mean? I think the world is a much safer place today than it was back then in 2001, based on the actions of the 40 heroes of Flight 93. And we'll get into that as we go along. But yeah, like I said, you probably have children of your own or brothers and sisters that will remind you the same way. You know what I mean? He was just the oldest of four, and he took the role that my parents put him in with great responsibility and joy.
And Patrick, how about you? Why don't you share? I know that Joey was your cousin, but from everything that you've told me, he was more like a brother to you.
Absolutely. Joey was the oldest of the four in his family, and I'm the oldest of four in my immediate family, but I'm also the oldest of all of those cousins on our shared mother's maternal side. So what was instilled in Joey as to his siblings, certainly the same for me, but then it also expanded to all of the rest of my cousins. And so the whole Gen 2, as we call them, because our parents were largely first-generation Americans, all of the Gen 2s are ones that, you know, at all of our very frequent family holiday gatherings, 70-plus people together for Christmas, all the kids, keep them in line. And Joey was the kind of guy who you had to particularly keep your eye on, because Mischief, I think, could have been his middle name. And if there was a way to find something to kind of do it a little bit different and, you know, kind of bring some energy to the situation, that was Joey. And it didn't change as he got older in life.
No. And we actually grew up in Monroeville, just right outside of Pittsburgh. We spent a year there, or a couple of years there.
And Scranton.
In Scranton, Pennsylvania. And one of the stories I can tell you, he was little. He was always a big fan of the Superman show. And we had a basement where we used to run around. So he actually had a blue towel that he would wrap around and tie around his neck as his cape, because he was Superman. So one day we're playing around in the basement with a couple of our cousins, and he decided he was going to try to dive through a plate glass window in a door. He does. He gets halfway through the door. He crashes through and he gets halfway through. And like a normal reaction is you're going to pull yourself back. Well, unfortunately, as he's pulling himself back, he cuts his left tricep from one side to the other side, just missing his brachial artery. If he would have gotten his brachial artery, he would have bled out before anyone could have done anything for him. So he gets rushed to the hospital. He gets 104 stitches Remember, he's 6 years old. Imagine how that scar went from inside all the way to the outside. And it was huge. You know what I mean? It wasn't like plastic surgery. His scar was probably a ½ an inch thick and 104 wide. And later in life, because he always talked about it, he actually got the little Superman logo tattooed above the scar, just as a reminder of that day that he was playing around thinking he was Superman trying to dive through a plate glass window.
And Kenny and I, we ride motorcycles, and the club that we're part of, the Iron Horse Cowboys, adopted that logo, the Superman, and we carry it on our sleeve. So.
So Patrick, while you're talking about the motorcycle, why don't you tell us a little bit about the ride that you all took?
Well, in 2009, Kenny and I were both on the family's Flight 93 board of directors, and we were active in the idea of raising money to help, construct the memorial at that time. And so we came up with this idea of taking motorcycles and driving from the Newark airport, where the Flight 93 originated, and driving all the way to San Francisco, where the plane was to have landed. And so we took off at the time the plane departed, like about a few days before September 11th. And on September 11th in 2009, we arrived at the exact time the plane was scheduled to arrive, with a bunch of other folks on motorcycles. And so we drove all the way across the United States, largely sticking to the route that the plane would have flown, which roughly is US 30, the Lincoln Highway, or Interstate 80. And Kenny gave me the task, since my then wife said, "You can go, but I don't want to see a picture of you on a motorcycle." So I cheated. One time I moved his brother's motorcycle up 2 gas pumps. Didn't start it, just pushed it up. So anyway, I had the privilege to lead that group of guys and gals across the United States. And the thing I think that was remarkable about that, in addition to the 100,000 plus we raised, was the idea that across the United States, we met folks just like you. And every place we stopped, each one of them had their story about how, on that day, what their experience had been. And so for me, what it brought forward is what I think is still true today, is that the emotions of that day for each of us are still very real and very raw. And so for history's sake, for the Boy Scouts that are here, my son's a Weeblo, gonna go Aero Light this year. Thank you. I hope he makes it to Eagle. Of course he will, thank you. So the idea is that for us, that ride was emblematic of kind of uniting the United States, finishing the ride for Flight 93, and honoring all of the 40 passengers and crew members, the heroes of Flight 93. Yeah. But on September 9th, we stopped, I think we were near Vegas in Nevada. Reno, Nevada. In Reno. And we all toasted, of course, Joey on what would have been his 50th birthday. So.
And the amazing thing about that trip was, it was 3,250 miles on the dot that we did in 8 days. I mean, and we had PR stops along the way. But, you know what I mean? I think that the most memorable part about the thing is we had people join us that would ride with us for, say, a day, or 5 miles or 10 miles, and as we traveled across the country. So it's just the interest, and all of you coming here today just to learn about the events of Flight 93. But the thing was, it took me a year to plan that route. I had to plan the route, get the people to come aboard, and also the stops. It took me a year. And what really made me morph into this thing is, you got to remember, Flight 93, the passengers and crew member had 30 minutes to gain information. From once that plane got hijacked on September 11th, they have 30 minutes to come up with a plan, gather information. They actually voted on a plan and then executed. That's amazing. And when I try to tell everybody when you're here, look to your left, look to your right, and just imagine, they didn't know each other. There are 40 people that come from all different walks of life, different ages, different career paths, different life experiences that are important. You know what I mean? And they were able to do something I think is very incredible and extraordinary. I mean, and if anybody does what I do for a living, and there's a couple people here, nothing goes as planned. And there's nothing we do that's in 30 minutes. And I think what's outstanding about this memorial, and please walk through the visitor center because it's outstanding. It's probably one of the best visitor centers I've seen, and I've gone to a lot of, visitor centers while we were involved in planning this one, and this one's outstanding. But it's just remarkable and amazing that how 40 individuals were able to come together, come up with a plan, vote on the plan, and execute that plan. And since we're coming up on Memorial Day, imagine what our country would look like today if Flight 93 reached its intended target, whether it was the White House or the U.S. Capitol. Just imagine the effects that it would have. And look where we are today. I mean, so I think their accomplishment, and I've always said this, Flight 93 is the first battle won in the war against this modern age of terrorism.
So I think it's really appropriate that although they weren't members of the military per se, they were very much like the roots of our democracy before we became a nation, where citizens became soldiers, took upon themselves the responsibility to act and to do something on behalf of what they believed in. And even though we had people from our enemies in World War II that were on that plane, a fellow from Japan, Germany, everybody was united in working together to make sure that that plane did not reach its target. Now, most of the information, the 9/11 Commission and others have reached the conclusion that the Capitol building was the target. In the course of our working to help get this memorial built, we've spent a lot of time walking the halls from the Senate side to the House side through the Capitol building and back and forth. We've been there as the plaque that's just outside the rotunda honoring the crew members was dedicated. And the thing that strikes me is that there's not just the cost to rebuild a building like that, but the idea of the artifacts, the statues, just all of the experiences that are so much an ingrained part of the history of this country that would have been lost and destroyed. We've had people we've met all across, including elected officials, tell us that they feel like they owed their lives to what those people did on that plane. Joey was one of those men who we know from the forensic evidence, the cockpit voice recorder, where his remains and personal effects were found, helped break into the cockpit. So we have as much pain and grief in our family from losing him, but also a recognition that he did something that is part of the values that Kenny and I and others in our family have had instilled into us, knew that they had to do something. Now, Donna was going to probably ask us a question about, what our experiences were like on that day. For me, I didn't know Joey was on the plane. It was a last-minute trip. But when we heard after the World Trade and Pentagon planes went into that, there was this Flight 93 and it crashed somewhere in Shanksville, didn't have any idea that my life was going to be personally involved. But what I said was, I don't know about anybody else, but my brothers and me, and Joey's very much like a brother to me, we would have had to stand up and do something. So his dad called me 6:30 in the evening that night and let us know the sad news. And I remember those words, thinking how something that just seemed to be, something from the heart as a remark to me, now was a knife in the heart, having lost a man that I had truly grown to love and respect and care about as my brother. So I'm going to let you kind of, if you want to ask another question.
Well, Ken, do you want to talk about your experience from the time that you heard about the crash and then how it was to come to the small town of Somerset County and how you were received by the people here?
I'm going to take you back to September 11, 2001. I was actually working day shift for the K-9 unit. That's where I was assigned at the time. And usually we go into work around 6 o'clock in the morning, then we do our training, and then we get ready to go out on the road. As I was getting dressed to go out on the road, because I never wore a uniform to work, I always had it in my locker. So we have a television set in our locker room. So I could see the actual news report saying, hey, they said it was a small plane that hit the World Trade Center. That's how the reports came out that morning. And I'm looking at the video images as I'm getting dressed, and I said, that's no small plane. And the funny thing is, this is no lie, a week before I went to a school that talked about the 1993 bombing of the World Trade Center. Just coincidence. You know what I mean? So the first thing pops in your head, hey, this doesn't look right to me. So as I'm finishing getting dressed, we got a call at the K-9 Center saying, hey, you have to go to Martin State Airport. They have a bomb threat at the control tower. So we ran out and started doing a job. And the thing is, a lot of people don't know about September 11th. Part of their campaign was a lot of misinformation all across the United States, trying to keep the 911 systems and law enforcement active doing random things. So through these bomb threats they had in our area, I had to go, clear a building with our bomb dogs. And I pulled up, and usually before I get close, I turn off my police radio, I turn off my cell phone, all kind of communications, because I don't want to set, if there is a device, I don't want to set it off, first off. So I'm in the building for about an hour, clearing it, and then when I come back on, I turn my cell phone on, and immediately my wife's calling me, and she goes, hey, I've been trying to reach you for an hour. She goes, your dad just called, and he thinks Joey was on one of the flights. Like probably all of you just sitting there, you're going to think, that can't be true. You know what I mean? You go right to denial instead of trying to accept it. And I said, and I kept, for every question that popped in my head, I'm asking her, has the airlines called? Has Joey's wife called? What has my dad found out anything more? So not knowing anything, I still continued to go out there, and we were being directed in all different locations to go different places. But as the day went on, near the end of my shift, you get that feeling that something's missing in your life. You get it where the hair in the back of your neck stands up, and you kind of, then that's the moment I realized that what my dad was telling my wife was true, that Joey was on one of the flights. So at that point in time, I said, hey, my parents lived in Ocean City, Maryland, which is, about 2.5 hours away from Baltimore. So I told my wife, hey, just park on the side of the road. I'll get a couple of the guys to drop me off. I'll just jump in a car and drive down to Ocean City. So I was wearing my police uniform. I took half of it off, gave it to the guys I work with, and then I jumped in a car and we rode down to Ocean City to be with my mom and dad. Around 6:30 at night, finally we get the word that Joey was definitely aboard Flight 93 on September 11th. And then for me, we have our parents, we kind of reverse roles. I kind of inherited the role of being the parent of my parents and trying to be their caretaker, so they have that time to where, they can start that grieving process for losing their firstborn child. And I know what it's like to lose my brother, but I have no idea what it'd be like to lose one of my kids or a spouse, what they must have been going through. So I kind of went into that mode where I want to learn as much as I can, as fast as I can, so I can direct my parents in the right direction. September 11th was a Tuesday. I ended up being here in Somerset on Thursday. Luckily the guys I worked with had called ahead and reached out to Pennsylvania State Police. They met me at where we were staying at Seven Springs, is where United was setting up their base of operations and housing the family members who would be coming in. And they actually picked me up. And my parents are Roman Catholic, and always have been, and they always believe the spirit was here. They believe my brother's spirit was here at the crash site. So my dad kept on saying, I got to find a way to get out there and lay a flower, just kind of letting Joey know that they were nearby. So that was my mission. Thank God that I was able to, complete that task. I was able to get, like a little plant. I was driven out here by a state trooper, and not knowing where I'm at, but I knew I was getting close because every roadblock I went through, they were saluting the police car. And we, what you do, what I do for a living, you have an ear for the police radio because you can always listen to it and carry different things on. So you can do that. So, but I'm not paying attention to that. So when we end up at the Western Overlook, which is, if you take this path around, we'll take you right there. And I actually got dropped off at the Western Overlook, and as I'm pulling in, there's about 30 state troopers lined up, and they're saluting the car as they drove me up to the Western Overlook. So it kind of gives you an idea how Western Pennsylvania and this small area is when it comes to it. So I actually got to meet the guy who was in charge of the FBI on this site, and also the NTSB agent that was here. And they gave me a rundown of what they had thought happened. And, they told me where my brother, they told me what seat my brother was in at the time. And they told me a little bit more. Then they actually walked me down close enough to where the crash site is. And I was able to lay the flower for my mom and dad. And then, after they dropped me off, I went over to a small place which is in Shanksville. Shanksville is just on the other side of the tree line for those who don't live here. There was a little store at the time, it was called Ida's. I walked in there because I needed to get something to eat because, like I said, I'm still wearing the same clothes I had on since Tuesday. And here it is Thursday. So I go in there and I pick up a little snack and something to drink, and I go up to pay for it. And the lady didn't know me from Adam, and she goes, "Your money's not good here." You know what I mean? And they start giving you a hug. And it just makes it takes that moment away from your sadness and kind of, not joy, but it kind of uplifts your spirits that here we are in a small town that is roughly like my childhood, that people are here, open their hearts and their homes to the families. And that's amazing.
I grew up, born in Buffalo, lived just south of Buffalo in the town of Hamburg. And the community here is one that so much reminds me of where I grew up. And the motto for the town of Hamburg is the town that friendship built. And I always said to myself that since I've gotten to know the people here in Shanksville and the ambassadors, the volunteers, and the people that live in the community, if the plane could have crashed anywhere, this was an ideal place in terms of the fabric of the community, the support from the people, that from their hearts they give and continue to give, not only of their time, but also of their money and their talents. The local elected officials, whether in the townships or the city or the county, have always supported us throughout the years as we've worked to build this memorial. And so early from the first days, even the Steelers organization had members from the team come on out and just be available to kind of support the family members. So it's just been an incredible experience to have such support, and it's very gratifying to be able to see so many folks come on in today and want to learn more about one of the 40 people that were heroes on that plane.
Ken, you have an interesting story about your mom and the Steelers. Do you want to share that with the visitors?
Sure. We, like I said, we arrived here on Thursday, a couple days after September 11th, and we didn't know it. And actually, I knew it, and I was trying to get my parents to it. Right here at the courthouse in Somerset, that you see if you come in off the turnpike or come in, the thing stands out. Well, they had a candlelight vigil, so we were able to get in town in time, just in time, because then they had a shuttle bus that took us from Seven Springs to the courthouse. So my brother was a huge Pittsburgh Pirate, Pittsburgh Steeler fan, a fanatic. I tell you what, he knew all the stats, all the players, and followed them all the way through. So did I. So after the shuttle bus got us to where we're going, 2 bus loads of the big tour buses parked right behind where we're parking. my parents get off and I'm just hovering around them. I'm just trying to get them where they needed to be and protect them and just trying to get them to where they needed to go so they didn't have to pay any attention. So next thing I know, I'm looking over at the buses that were coming in. And next thing you know, I can see Coach Cower, his wife, and, Jerome Bettis, Cordell Stewart, and a bunch of other of the Pittsburgh Steelers coming off. The thing was, I lost mom and dad. I didn't really lose them. The players came out and encircled them. And then they ushered her to the candlelight vigil, which was an amazing thing to watch and to be part of. It was like a wave. You could see how they just took her mom and dad, where they go. They sat down, they sat behind them. They didn't want any attention. They're telling the press to get away because they're trying to be interviewed. And they said, look, I'll talk to you guys after the service is all done and the families leave. So they ushered my mom and dad to their seats. And I says, okay. So, which is good. It took their mind off their pain. And after the service was over, we start walking back to our shuttle bus to go back. I still can't find mom and dad. Next thing you know, I'm walking around thinking about, the next thing you know, I'm start looking at the buses. The Rooney family actually had my mom and dad on their bus. And this gives you an idea how lucky you guys are in Western Pennsylvania to have, some of these sport people that care about family. So next thing you know, they're on the bus with them and all the players. And the players are trying to give them pizza, something to drink, just being caretakers of them. And it's like, I'm trying to get them off the bus, to get them back so they can rest. And, my dad knew that Joey was a huge Steeler fan, so he kind of took it as an honor that, just to give you an idea how the nation came together that day. I think it's what this memorial does real good also, is that it just shows you how the whole country came together after the events of September 11th and opened their hearts and in their minds and their families. That was huge. And I've been coming here probably several times every year for the last 17 years, going on 18 years. I was blessed. I was one of the 15 advisory commissioners that oversaw the design and construction of the memorial. And when I was doing it, it didn't really register me how important, or I was blessed to have that job to continue to be my brother's voice and the voice of the 40 heroes. It went from trying to honor my brother's memory to morphed in to being the voice of the heroes of Flight 93. Those 40 people who gave their lives so we can continue to live our life like it's September 10th, 2001. You know what I mean? And I know I'm a little bit rambling here, but I'm on a roll. So, it's Flight 93 was not the defining moment in their lives. You know what I mean? I believe the 40 heroes of Flight 93 were extraordinary people before that event. And they had that motivation just to get home that day to have dinner with their family. I mean, think about it. And I keep going back this, and I'll keep on harping on it. They were able to do something extraordinary in 30 minutes. You got to remember, plane gets hijacked. You got to get over that initial shock of what's going on. You know what I mean? That emotional overload, that adrenaline rush. And then all of a sudden, get your bearings together and say, hey, we got to do something. You know what I mean? Okay, let's make some phone calls. Then they find out that planes are being used as weapons, which has never been used in our history. You know what I mean? Usually when you get hijacked, okay, we're going to land it somewhere, we're going to negotiate a ransom. Okay, that's what we were taught. If something happens, sit idly by. Well, times have changed. Now these guys are using planes as weapons. Now they know that. They make their phone calls. They're able to gather that information, discuss it. Okay, I'm not going down like that. So now they come up with a plan. they do the most democratic thing is they vote on that plan. And I can tell you what, we can do something in the police department and nothing will ever go right in 30 minutes. And then you're going to come up with a contingency plan. That won't go right either. We plan things for days. They did it in 30 minutes. And then you got to look at who's on the plane. I mean, look around. You had all different ages, all different sexes, all different life experiences. You know, a lot of people don't know is they had a guy who had a private pilot license. You know what I mean? He could land that thing. I think their motivation was just to get control of that plane. You know, I think they're telling themselves, this is just Kenny Nacke's view, is just that not today, not tomorrow, not never. I'm not going to let you win. And then listening to the cockpit voice recorder, I had the opportunity to listen to it, which is rare, because it was the first time it's ever been done, is Flight 93. It's probably the only time it's been done where family members get to listen to the cockpit voice recorder. And I can tell you what, I can listen to their voices, and when you do hear their voices, it's calm. It's not panic, which you would think it would be. I mean, I would. I think after the emotional thing that, they went through, that, you would hear that. But no, it's calm. And I can tell you that not every family member chose to listen to it, and I could totally understand why. But there was a point in time in the recording, my sister and I were looking, listening, and we looked at each other at the same moment in time. It's a phrase that I had been chased by. You know what I mean? Made the hair on the back of my neck stand up. That, that's Joey's voice. And then you can hear the engagement by the cockpit door. Because remember, Flight 93 only had 4 hijackers on it instead of 5. The 5th one got arrested in Florida days before the event. So you hear, and I said this earlier, that you can hear them engage him, and I wouldn't want to be him because they really kicked his ass and he died. And then the last words that you hear is pull it up, or we die. So they broke into the cockpit.
And we know because although when you look at the boulder, that's where most of the fuselage in the plane impacted, but the nose hit and broke off and went further back into the woods. And that's where Joey's personal effects and remains were found. And we're fortunate that our nation worked in a way after September 11th that they took, at the end of the investigation, all of the components from the plane and put them into 5 shipping containers. And those were kept outside of Hartford, Connecticut in a warehouse. Same place where Kennedy's plane was kept after his accident. And it wasn't until last March and April that the Park Service, the FBI, and a few family members were allowed, myself included, to be able to go and witness those containers being opened, the contents being spread out on the warehouse floor, in Tyvek suits with respirators, hands and knees, these people from the FBI going through the wreckage, literally piece by piece by piece. Some of it they kept to be able to put on display. Maybe someday we'll have something here at the Learning Center, Smithsonian, whatever. But the rest of it went into 4 shipping containers that are now buried down just the other side of the crash site. What was found during that process were some human remains. Those, I was able to be here last week Friday along with some other family members, and those human remains, unidentified, were buried right in front of that boulder. In front of those, there's 3 caskets that years before that we were able to put into the ground as well. The point of it is that the first personal effect that was found by the FBI as they went through all of that wreckage was his brother's Sears credit card. There were only a few more items that were found that were able to be identified as personal objects. And for me, it's just one more step in what has been a very transformative kind of experience to have been asked by Ken to do whatever I could do to help this process. And so from those earliest days in Somerset, the earliest days of meeting the people here in Shanksville and the area, we've grown to become a part of this community. My wife and I were up here a couple weeks ago, and we were driving through the back roads. She goes, you drive this place like it's your home. And I go, it is. This is like the town I grew up in. This is a place that, not only did friendship build, but it built this memorial too. And so, we're very pleased to be able to come here and talk to y'all today. Just by a show of hands, how many people are, from the United States? Anybody not from the United States? Okay, how many people are from Pennsylvania? What other states do we have besides PA? What else? Maryland, what else? Michigan. Nobody from Florida? Florida. Anyway, the point is this. We did that motorcycle ride. We've worked on this memorial for all of these years. And what it's done is the same thing that was the name of the airlines. It's united. Because that's how we do stand. United. And so when we were able to reinter those remains last week, it was good to know that we had reunited all of the remains that were identifiable in one place.
And the trees are still, I've probably walked every acre of this 2,200 acre. Believe it or not, this memorial is 2,200 acres.
I know because we bought it, the families of Flight 93.
But I've walked it, from all different points. And I've gone past the rock and into the trees, and I can tell you today that the hemlocks behind the boulder are still giving up pieces of the plane. And I was actually shown where my brother's remains were found by the coroner, who I became friends with. And actually walking through there, I actually have 2 pieces of the cockpit. That I've just found recently.
But we don't tell the Park Service.
Oh,
you can edit that out.
oh, they know, I tell them.
Gosh, you might have to edit that out.
No, but it just goes to show you that how I've been coming here since 2001, and what was important to my family and actually my parents was that they wanted the landscape to stay as close as it was as the September 11th, which it has. They moved some dirt around and moved some businesses away, but overall, the kind of land speaks for itself. And I got an education on acid mine runoff, on hemlocks, on roads, and everything. So through the meetings, but one time, give you a little, this is going back probably about 8 years ago. I'm out here after a meeting, and I just come to pay my respects inside the crash site. And where you can't see it, there's a little hill and it's got some trees, but there's some benches for the family members to sit in. And I'm just sitting there just waiting for, to time it so I can get home and not hit a lot of traffic to get back home where I live. So I'm sitting there, and next thing I know, if you're looking at it from the wall of names, you can see the boulder off to the left. You'll see a telephone pole and a tree line. 2 black bear cubs come running out of the tree line. This is before we got the boulder there, run right out to where the boulder is, and they start wrestling and fighting and knocking the snot out of each other. The next thing you know, I start laughing. What made it funny was, because that's what Joey and I did always growing up. We would wrestle in the basement. You'd be WWE off the top rope, off the couch, and wrestling. And these are what the bears are doing. So I've actually seen the landscape heal, just like our country has healed, just like how we are healing every day, and moving on. It kind of showed me, kind of made me turn the corner a little bit, that life does go on, you know what I mean? It's time to start honoring the lives of the 40 heroes of Flight 93. So that's kind of where I transitioned from just being Joey's voice to being the voice of the 40. And I've become real good friends with other family members, knowing their stories and sharing those stories. So it's kind of, I try to make, when I talk, try to make it inclusive, because I don't really believe Flight 93 could have done what they did if they all didn't work together. I think it's kind of like, I kind of use a spear. You got the tip, you got the base, and then you got the shaft. If any one of those 3 components fail, the spear fails. So if it wasn't for the 40 people coming together, giving their emotion, you know, and that support that's needed to get you to push you over that hump, that's what I said. I really don't think Flight 93 would have been successful if they all didn't, you know, join in and agree with what they were doing and became one. And I think it's what was extraordinary about that day. And I know I'm harping on it, but
Tip of the spear.
it's amazing what 40 individuals did from all walks of life did that day. I mean, I think if you walk away with anything, just like I said, look to your left, look to your right, and front and behind you. Look at the people. And I always say, when you start walking up this way towards the portal to get you into the visitor center, you know, to me it says, could I have done what they did? Would I have done what they did? And I always walk away with is yes, I would have. You know what I mean? Just for the same motivations they had. I want to get home to my kids. I want to get home to my wife. I want to get home to whoever I had to go home to and just have dinner with them. I mean, think about that. And I think that's the true story about Flight 93, is just the adversity that they were faced with, overcome it, and defeated their enemy. I mean, granted, I mean, you know, I hate when people call them victims. And I know by the definition they are. But I think at that day, they all decided that that's not going to happen to me. I'm going to take my destiny in my hand. Whatever happens, happens. But I'm going to do what I can do to prevent a greater tragedy that day. And like I said, looking back, really think about what our country would look like today if that plane was able to reach the U.S. Capitol or the White House. It's amazing.
One of the things for me that I've learned from the experiences we've had, both inside our family and in this community, is that, you know, faith really matters. Believing that you can do something is as important as being able to actually do it. And if you have a chance to just drive across the street to a little rose garden that, you know, hasn't become what it was intended to be, but still may, you'll see there's a plaque there to Joey. And it has, you know, that biblical phrase from John 15:13. It says, "No greater love hath a man than to give his life for his friends." And I think about that from time to time because that's exactly what they did. Maybe the intention was to land the plane in Pittsburgh, but at the end of the day, their life's journeys ended just down this hill in ways that it's almost impossible for us to understand what that experience would have been like. But we know from the many, many moments that have been part of our lives since that there are these blessings, that there are these moments that are almost magical. Riding 250 miles across the United States and never seeing a drop of rain. Passing between, you know, a tornado on this side up on the buttes and all kinds of wind and dust and rain on the left, and we finally arrive for the end of the day, and you know, the wind dies down, the dust literally is settling as we're, you know, going into the building, and you know, the sun's setting, and you just know. I was flying south from Buffalo to go home to Florida on September 10th, 2001. I love flying. You know, I would have loved to have been a pilot if my eyes weren't so bad. The idea is that on that day, I was on a plane that was much more empty than they are these days. And I moved around. I changed my seat 2 or 3 times, just couldn't get comfortable. I didn't remember that until I was on the first plane back from Fort Myers after September 11th, when they first let the planes fly again. And we're flying into Pittsburgh because we're going to go out to Seven Springs and meet all of the rest of our family. And a gal I was sitting next to is a terrible flyer. And she looks at me, clenched onto my thigh because she's coming into land and is scared dead to death. And I turned white. And she says, "I'm the one that's, what's going on?" And I said, "I just remembered that on the 10th of September, I was flying south across here." And I easily could have been looking out the window to the east and seen where it was. My cousin lost his life. And so, you know, maybe we don't always recognize it, maybe we don't always feel it, but there are so many more connections between us than we recognize. The United States was never as unified in my life experience other than when we landed on the moon and when JFK was shot. We've come a long way since then. And I just would like to have you think for a minute about, as you walk away from here, how you felt during those weeks and months after, and why it is that things are so much different today. I'm pretty sure the people on that plane who are asked to do more in a day than Kenny and I have done every day since to bring this memorial to fruition. What do we do when we face those moments? How do we choose to act? And I know we're going close towards our hour, and Donna, you probably want to have folks ask questions.
Any questions for Ken? Or
Young man, you were first.
With the coroner.
Wally.
Great. I tell you what, if you know, and it goes to I guess this area, because he kind of he does his job very well, but he also treats you like family.
Yeah.
So I think how he gauges it is just how would he want to be treated if I was in the same, if roles were reversed kind of thing. So he was great. And you know, he spent the day with me, and he walked me around and showed me things, you know what I mean? And it just, if you guys are local, then you know how Wally Miller is, but
I am local.
yeah. So he's a fantastic guy, but
He's family.
It
What
goes
else
to the
can we
community,
say?
though. I
Yeah.
mean, I've been coming here, coming up on 18 years. You know what I mean? And I've met local business owners.
This young man had a
People
question too.
The voice recorder, Cockpit. That is
Right.
Cockpit.
Yeah.
Right.
Does it pick up the whole length of the plane in
No.
voices, or
No.
is it just in a immediate area?
There's, just to give you a quick history, there's, I mean, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. There's 5 microphones in the cockpit. One above each, the pilot, the co-pilot, the recorders are in their headsets, and then there's one right above the door. So within it, so that's how they could hear what was going on at the base of the door.
So everything you heard was immediate.
Was in the cockpit.
Yes,
Right.
yeah, you couldn't hear, but you
Point of
could,
attack.
yeah, point of
Right.
attack, but you could hear some things as they got closer to it.
Anyone else? I know we've gone long. It's warm in here. Yes, sir.
No,
No, he did not.
no, and you know, I've been asked that question a lot. I don't think he would, because he's not going to, you know, I mean, and I'm glad people did.
In his mind,
His mindset.
they were
was-
landing at Pittsburgh.
Right. In his mind, like saying, "You're my target. You're my target. I'm not going to take my eyes off of you." So, and I look at it this way: they were left to roam the plane, and you know, they were hurt. You know, they were kind of pushed back to the rear of the plane, and that's where you can see where they used their. When you go through the memorial, it tells you what airphones that they were using. But who was watching them? You know what I mean? I think they all got together and say, "Hey, okay, my job here is to protect you, so you can make the phone calls." And then come over the plane. I think they all work together. That's why I said what they did in 30 minutes is amazing. Think about it.
Any other questions? Well, you've all been great, taking the time to listen to a little bit about a man we love dearly and miss daily. Our family suffered a bit of a double whammy. Kenny not only lost his brother on September 11th, less than 7 weeks later, he lost his dad. My uncle was a tough guy. I know I worked for him briefly. Broken heart. He was with us, leading us. The first time they were allowed us to come out to the memorial, the temporary memorial, to be on the grounds, there were 6 buses full. We were in the first bus. He was at the front of the bus. There were 52 people from our family that filled that bus. So it's been an experience for us to be able to be here, literally at the forefront of helping to bring this memorial to fruition, but not just to honor Joey, but to honor all those that were on the plane with him, that fought, and in my mind, preserved our freedom today. So I want to thank you all for being here. Donna, is
Can
there
I have
anything
the
else?
stage back?
Yeah,
Al?
you
Or
make,
do
you,
Like I said, I mean, thank you for coming. I mean,
she wants the stage.
I know it's hot, but thank you for coming. I just want to say thank you.
Absolutely. That's one of the things that we're very fortunate at this memorial is we still have individuals who are related to the passenger and crew members, family members who can come out here and tell their stories. We have a speaker series goes on all summer, so we have different programs each month. If you want to become a member of the Friends of Flight 93, we would love to have you as a member. Our membership, we send out notifications of programs that we have going on here so that you can take advantage of, yes.
Yes.
Two
He has
boys.
2 boys. One of them lives with me. Yeah.
And the younger one has a son who's my son's age. And, you know, the interesting thing is, had the opportunity to pick that boy's name. You want to guess? He never was told, but he asked one day, "Am I named after your coach?" You got big shoes to fill. So, sorry, Donna.
That's okay, that's fine. Any other questions?
I highly encourage you to join the Friends. You have a lot of special benefits. I know I had Donna's job for a few years and others before that, and it's a tremendous reward just knowing that you're on the inside circle of all of that information.
Go to the
And
visitor
helping
center.
a good thing.
Go to the visitor center because it's probably one of the better ones you'll see.
Thank y'all.